Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Last week, we talked about credit scores, which was a very exciting discussion. This week, we're going to do a follow-on episode on credit and identity theft monitoring because we felt like it was worth a little bit more of a deep dive on it and a good conversation to have right after we talk about credit scores.
And last week I got really worked up about credit scores because it annoys me to no end. But the thing that bothers me even more than the whole ecosystem of credit scores is credit monitoring. So
you're even more angry and passionate about this topic.
I'm even more angry and passionate about it because it's such a ripoff.
Okay, so like we do with many episodes, we like to share our own personal experiences. I already know the answer to this question because you've gotten very fired up before it when we do our expense tracking and review it with each other. But Mike, do you use any sort of a credit monitoring service or pay for identity theft protection?
Absolutely not.
So I do use a identity theft and credit monitoring service. I use Credit Secure, which is tied to American Express. I think you have to have an American Express card to do it. And I've had it for a while. I've mentioned on the last show, my identity has been stolen twice, once about 10 years ago and once about less than a year ago, actually. And I found out the first one, I did not have any monitoring. I've had monitoring most of the time for the past 10 years, which is, now that I think about it, a little bit upsetting when I add up the cost over 10 years. But we'll get into more. I mean, it's given me a lot of peace of mind after, what was a very sort of difficult situation that really where I felt very violated afterwards. And so I pay $16.99 a month for that. And then recently, I'm not really sure when. Mike, you look upset when I say that. I know.
It's just
at some point,
it's a lot of money for nothing.
I know. And it gets worse because at some point, I'm not really sure when, my husband also signed up for it, which I don't really even think he needs it. He's never had his identity stolen. We'll get into this. But at some point, he got probably upsold it through someone at American Express also. And it took me a while to even notice because when we were doing expense tracking, I would see the expense, but then I was like, oh, I already wrote that down. And then I was realizing there were two of them. It was like one on his card and one on my card. So we're paying, I don't know, what's $17 times 2?
Too much?
Too much. I was just going to say that. But really, what is it? $34. We're paying $34. It's upsetting, I know. We are paying collectively $407 a year.
That's outrageous.
I know.
All right. So
we'll just burn it.
Instead of me just criticizing you about your expenses for 30 minutes, maybe we'll share some information about what this is.
Sure. Sounds good.
So what is credit monitoring?
Every service is a little bit different and offers, some different types and categories of services. But most credit and identity theft monitoring services cover a couple of core things. They cover credit monitoring, which is, okay, I wasn't ready to explain each of these for what it's worth. Let me pull one up just so it actually so I can give some more intelligent descriptions. Hold on.
Do you want me to explain them?
Oh, can you do it off the top of your head?
Yeah, of course.
I'm just having trouble putting words to things sometimes. Credit monitoring and identity theft monitoring services cover a few key categories. Every service is a little bit different, so you need to kind of read the fine print and see what they do versus don't offer. But the big categories are actual credit monitoring, which is they're looking for when an inquiry is popped on your credit report and they immediately notify you about it. They're looking for a really unusual charge or a payment that hasn't been made, anything that kind of is a pop on your credit report. They're immediately notifying you about something that is any unusual activity on your credit. They also provide you with copies of your credit report. They also, many of them provide some level of identity restoration or insurance services. So like that could include like lost wallet protection, fraud resolution support, and other services to help you, if your identity is stolen, to help you go through the recovery process, which can often be a bit of like a painful process. And then many of them also cover dark web monitoring, which is a little bit of a racket in my opinion, because I have a service that provides that now, and I get all these like weird notifications about dark web monitoring where like my social security number or my name or something's popped up, but they don't ever give you any like full piece of information. It's like a morsel of something where they sort of tell you that something's popped up, but you don't really know where or in what context or how. So I'm like, well, what was the point in that? It's like you telling me that my social security number is out there on the interweb somewhere, but you can't tell me where or how or what to do about it. You're just freaking me out about it. So to me, that particular service is kind of useless and not that helpful. Like I know my information's out there places. Everybody's is in different ways.
And I would say that all of those things you listed are particularly useless because you can DIY all this stuff yourself. So on our previous episode, we talked about freezing your credit. So if your credit report is frozen, there is no activity on it. You don't need alerts about it. Nothing can happen. It can't be stolen. Nobody can borrow money in your name. Also, all of these agencies have credit monitoring. It's their reports. You can sign up for this for free from them, or they have enhanced services which will do extra stuff for you. So you can get copies of your credit reports for free. You can see what's going on.
You can get one copy of your credit report per year from each credit reporting agency. Like they have to provide you that by law.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to get it with as much frequency as you might with a service, but you get it enough. Like
you won't need it.
Between the freeze and once a year, if you're curious to like look at it, that's really all you need.
Yeah.
And then as far as getting your score, a lot of people just want to know their score sometimes. And there's a ton of free services like Credit Karma where you can get your credit score for free. A lot of credit cards, like what you were just mentioning, Mike, like when you looked up your score last week to share it on the episode, you looked it up through your credit card because they provide a free credit score as one of the benefits.
Yeah. Or you just go directly to the agencies. Like this is their information. And so any identity theft service or Credit Karma or any of those, they're just going to Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion to get that information. So just go directly there and you can look it up. So you can DIY all of this stuff, but the real key here is that if you freeze your credit report, there is no risk of any of this stuff happening. The example I gave last week was credit freezing is building a giant wall around your house to prevent intruders. Credit monitoring is leaving your front door open and just having a camera to see who comes in and takes your stuff.
So I think the big question that a lot of people have, Mike, and that you and I frequently debate every time we are looking at expense tracking, because you're always giving me a hard time about me paying for the service, is it worth it to pay for a credit monitoring or identity theft service or not, right? That's the big question that many people have is, should they be paying for something like this or should they not? Is it worth it? Again, there's a lot of different things to kind of think through and consider here. And I know you think it's just a strong no, but I think it's worth talking through a few of the considerations that people might have, right? It's such a personal decision. You really need to weigh the pros and cons and the kind of risk trade-offs for your own personal situation. As an example, many articles that you might read on this topic suggest things like the average person doesn't need it, but if your identity has been stolen before, that it is something you might want to invest in and that you might be more willing to invest in because you have had that experience and recognize that there's some pain involved in it and that you're just at a higher risk because your information has been out there before. A lot of this, I think, is a decision on just the peace of mind that it may or may not give you and weighing that against the cost. And again, it's a bit of a like pros and cons, risks, trade-off assessment of how important it is to you and if you want to do it or not.
I don't agree with you at all.
Why? But tell me why, because I have one other thing that I want to put out there to kind of like challenge your thinking on this a little bit.
Okay. If you freeze your credit reports, your information can't be stolen and people can't borrow money in your name. and it's very simple. So keep your reports frozen.
So they can do other things in your name. They can do tax fraud, they can do some other social security fraud, etc. And so the identity theft insurance piece of it could have value to people.
Okay, tell me more.
Okay. I mean, I was waiting because I was more curious, like if you agree or not. So think of it that I was thinking about this earlier today when I was prepping for this episode. So this essentially, whether you want to call it the credit monitoring angle or the identity theft protection angle, this service is essentially an insurance offering, right? So it is providing you some different information, but ultimately it is outside of all the pieces that you could go and get for free, like your credit score, like your reports, things like that. It is providing you, almost all of them are providing you some level of identity theft insurance. And they have, a lot of them have a maximum of like up to 1 million and like restitution and other things. They have fraud prevention specialists that help you like white glove service through the fraud resolution process, which is a huge pain in the butt. So I've been through it, and I don't know if you know how this works, Mike, but I have a friend that works at Capital One, and when my identity was stolen the first time, there was a huge amount of credit racked up. It happened to be with Capital One. And at the time, I called him for advice and was like, what do I do? This is crazy. And he was explaining to me that they have entire departments that spend, months, sometimes years investigating you, because they actually assume that many people who claim identity theft are actually doing it fraudulently, because that does happen a lot. So a lot of people might rack up debt and then say, oh, I didn't do that. My identity was stolen. And just call the credit card company and say, like, I'm not paying this. It wasn't me. Somebody else opened a credit card and used it. So they go to great lengths to actually investigate all of those identity theft claims. And it can take months, years, even longer for them to investigate to prove that it actually wasn't you that made those charges. Like they're looking at where the credit card was sent. I mean, sometimes they'll go as far as to like get video cameras from stores for big purchases and things like that. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yes. And again, it makes sense because so many people would fraudulently just try to get out of credit card bills and credit card charges. And that does happen, that they have to actually prove that you weren't the one that made these charges. So when it happened to me, and there was, again, I don't remember the amount, but it was like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 racked up on, I had really good credit, so a big credit limit, and racked up on these cards. He was able to vouch for me and say, like, she didn't do this. And they more quickly resolved my case. Anyways, he was able to vouch for me. They more quickly resolved my case. But if they hadn't done that, it would have taken a very long time. And I think one of the things that I learned through that process was the value in these policies and these identity theft protection services is that they help you with that process, right? They kind of, many of them literally like use the term white glove and say that they just help you from the very beginning to the very end. They know how it works. They're adept at it. You're kind of going into it for the first time and you have no idea how to navigate it. They're helping you with that. So the way I think about it, and my thing that I thought I could maybe challenge you on, Mike, was think of this as an insurance product, right? And I know you don't sign up for a lot of insurance products unless you have to, like car insurance or homeowners insurance. Like, I think we're similar, that when someone tries to sell us like travel insurance on a trip or something, like we don't go for it. But this is one where if you have been burned in the past, you might feel more incentivized to want insurance for a situation like that, because you've been through it, you know how it feels, and you don't ever want to go through it again.
Here's the thing, though. All of those examples you just listed are about getting loans taken out in your name. And if you freeze your credit reports, those things can happen. Now, identity theft as it relates to tax fraud or voter fraud or something like that, those are legit. And I think those are a little bit rarer because they're harder. If these insurance policies cover those things, fair point. It might be worth it. They do. They do. But that is a good point, that what they don't cover it. Well, let me give you the scenario that happened to me last year. Well, it was last year, like 2019, but not that long ago. I got a pop on my credit monitoring service, and I must have forgot. I don't know why I can't even think what this was now.
but it must have been that my freeze expired because freezes expire after some period of time, right?
No.
No, locks. Something used to expire.
I think
There is something.
this lock thing that you were mentioning is maybe expires. So if you have a temporary freeze, you can tell them the dates you want it to start and stop. But a freeze is permanent until you unfreeze it. It's permafrost, if you will.
Anyways, somebody applied for credit at Bank of America. I guess I forgot. I don't know if I didn't have a freeze on my credit or what. Clearly, I like took my eye off the ball, probably because I had a credit monitoring service. But I got a pop and I was like, I didn't apply for anything. I don't know what this is. And I immediately called because it was actually a bank I used. I immediately called them and they said, oh, we got a... Oh, wait.
Is this story going somewhere, Maggie?
Oh, I know what it is. So I have to look up because I kept notes on this.
Oh my God.
So I got a notification on one of my credit cards that they filed for a change of... I told you about this. Don't you remember this? I knew you when this happened. Do you not remember this story? It hurts my feelings that you don't remember this story.
Maybe. Tell me again.
I can't even remember what bank it was with now. It was with a bank that I don't actually have I have like my 401k with, but I don't have any like cash accounts at. I got a notice through my account with this company that they were changing my address. They said like, we received your change of address and phone number. Thank you very much. You know, if this wasn't real. And I was like, holy crap, I've not changed my address. So I immediately called them. They're like, oh, we got a request to change your address, blah, blah, blah. But it was tied to a new credit card application. And I was like, well, I didn't apply for a credit card either. And the next day, or like within the next day or two, I got a pop on my credit report through my credit monitoring service. So I actually got this change of address before it even hit hit enough of the signals or whatever to send me the notification. And so somebody had changed my address and applied for a credit card. And it just happened to be an institution that I was already banking at for some other things, or that I had a different account at. And so I immediately was able to shut it off. I said, this is not me. This is not real. They had to go through a bunch of things to verify my identity. And they stopped the card before it was mailed out to this different address. There was another address. It was actually an Atlanta address because they were like, this isn't your address. I was like, that is not my address. It was an Atlanta address. And I don't remember the point of this story, Mike.
I think you were trying
what we were talking about.
You were trying to tell me the benefits of this program that you subscribe to. And my response is going to be the same, that if you had your credit report frozen, the person would not have been able to open up the credit card.
I think at the time, you're right. I just did not. I have once had freezes on my credit. And I think at the time, I just didn't have a freeze. But you are right. Now, they would have been able to change my address, right? They would have been able to do that because however they did that.
Didn't you just call the bank?
Well, if it wasn't my bank, though, that I got a notification about the change of address. So you're right. No, I would have still gotten the notification about the change of address because they can't change my address at a place that I don't have an account. So you're right. All of these things still would have been protected if I just had a freeze on my credit. Fair point. As always, you're right, Mike. Okay, but our point is, as you're thinking, I don't even remember what our point was, honestly. I was trying to convince you why you should think of this like an insurance product. So my only last point to you is, and then I'm going to give up after this because this feels like a fight I'm going to lose. Car insurance, right? So I actually looked these stats up, and I forgot the numbers already, but I looked them up earlier today.
But trust me, I looked up stats and they're real.
It was like, I looked up stats, they're real. It was like millions of things. So there are more people that get their identity stolen every year than there are people who get in car crashes every year. That is a true story. I'm not going to quote my sources, but I definitely use the internet. And it was like twice as many people. It was like 14 million people get their identity stolen a year and like 6 million people get in a car crash every year. So your odds of getting your identity stolen are higher than you getting in a car crash. You have car insurance, Mike. I know you legally have to have car insurance, but you have certain levels of it that you choose based on the value of your car and what you don't want to get kind of stuck dealing with, right? So now walk me through the difference between that and being willing to invest in insurance for this.
It would be like buying car insurance when you don't own a car. So if you have a credit freeze, It's like not owning
That's
a car.
the
You would
worst.
never get into a car. You don't need insurance. But what I'll tell you about that stat is what they're referring to, I'm sure. Even you haven't quoted your sources, so I can't verify this, but getting your credit card number
I'll
stolen.
never quote my sources. I protect my sources.
Right, because you just make up these stats. I know how you work. So getting your credit card number stolen and having somebody buy something adds to that number. That happens to me all the
you're right.
time, like multiple times a year. And so I see it. Somebody spent $50 on something. I maybe get notified by the credit card. Maybe I catch it myself. They mail me a new credit card. I get it refunded. That is different than having somebody open up a $50,000 line of credit and spending that amount of money.
That's fair.
So the latter, the larger, more
That's
serious
fair. You're
ones.
debunking all of my points. I
Yes,
should have been
this
able
is
to
what I
predict this.
love to do. So if you freeze your credit reports, the serious ones don't happen. You will still be a victim of getting your credit card stolen, but there are so many mechanisms in place by the banks and credit card companies to catch this and fix it that I've probably had this happen to me maybe 30, 40 times over my life.
Yeah.
And not once have I ever had anything more
Been on the
than,
hook for it.
yeah, just a refund and a
Or
new
not
car
had
in the
it,
mail.
like, easily fixed. Yeah, that's fair. Oh, there's something else I was going to say about that.
Oh, you want to keep going?
No. It was something about, it was not trying to debunk this anymore. Another benefit of doing detailed expense tracking is you also catch any of those issues because you immediately see. And so that is another thing that I've enjoyed because I'll now and then I'll realize like, oh, I thought I canceled that service and like that's still getting charged, or I've had some sort of a fraudulent charge. So it's like just another benefit of doing expense tracking.
Yes.
So go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't remember.
That's my plan. Okay, thanks for letting me go first because I would have forgotten that. Okay, so okay, I get it. So all my points are just no longer valued. Look, if you did want to get credit monitoring or identity theft monitoring, which quite honestly, after this discussion with you, Mike, I feel like it's a waste of time for me to even go through this part of our talk, but I'm going to do it quickly. The services can range anywhere from $7 to 30 plus a month. Many companies offer family plans. Some only offer individual plans. There's a number of reputable companies like LifeLock, Xander Insurance, Identity Guard, American Express Credit Secure, Identity Force, ID Watchdog, etc. And we'll put some links in the show notes to these that offer credit monitoring or identity theft insurance. And, the main things are you just want to make sure whatever company you have provides monitoring across all three credit bureaus versus just one. And then also you want to read the fine print, right? So some of them, if you actually do the service that's tied to one of the credit bureaus, which should make you even more angry, Mike, that they even offer that.
Mhm.
Like they create the credit bureau in the first place, and then they charge you for a service to
It
monitor
does.
what's
It
happening
does.
in their own bureau. So what's even crazier, and like talk about getting pissed off, is when you join some of those, sometimes there can be an arbitration clause in the terms of service where you're actually waiving your right to a class action lawsuit if something were to go wrong, which is even more ridiculous. But you don't seem to be getting as fired up about that piece. You just lost all your
I know,
all
I'm
your
worn
fire
out.
on this.
But not only do they have separate services that you can subscribe to, but many homeowners insurance policies have this available. And chances are you're already paying for some version of this service with your home insurance or your renter's insurance. So check what you have already. You might already be paying.
Yeah, that's a great point. So the one thing that I learned from doing this research and looking at some of the more detailed prices is Xander Insurance by far has the cheapest price. But after doing a little bit more research, I realized, and Xander's like less than half the price of some others. And as an example, if we were to switch from what we have now to the Xander family plan, we would save $252 a year. Though Mike would argue if we would just stop what we have altogether, which is what we should have, we would save over $400. So, and save is the wrong word because he thinks we're wasting our money now. But the interesting thing about Xander specifically is that it's not actually credit monitoring. It's only ID theft protection, which is why it's significantly cheaper. And their kind of angle on why you don't need credit monitoring is because you can do that part yourself and you can get the free reports and you can freeze your credit, etc. Which is kind of funny that even the insurance company is like, you don't even need that. We're just going to offer the piece that is not provided, that you can't DIY, right? Which is the ID theft protection and some kind of more in-depth monitoring. in that area. So it's a little bit, I thought the Xandr one was a nice product because it's a little bit of an in-between. Like if you want some peace of mind that if your identity were to be stolen, you would have fraud resolution specialists that are helping you through that. It could be a nice middle ground for some people. I realize not for you, but for some people.
I don't
Perhaps
like
me.
middle grounds. I'm
know.
all
I was
in
just,
or not at all.
I was just explaining this to my husband earlier tonight when we were on a walk right before this, because I was telling him we were doing this episode, and I was like, so look, we've either got to quit what we're on altogether. These are our options. Like one of them is not to stay with this $400 a month because I can't deal with Mike questioning me every month when we review expenses. And, and I don't want to waste $400 a year. And I was like, so either we go to 0 or we do the Xandr as like a little bit of a middle ground. So we'll see. We haven't decided yet. We're going to sleep on it. We're going to keep wasting money while we sleep on it for another week or so. And then, the next thing that you talked about briefly on the last episode, Mike, was, do you really need credit monitoring for your kids at all? Most people say you probably don't, but it is a plus that some of the services offer. And so if it's there, of course, take advantage of it, but it's certainly not something you should worry about like paying extra for. And Mike, you shared that nice hack about adding your kids to your credit card and then being able to get a free credit report for them as a result, to be able to put a freeze on their credit.
Right.
To protect them. So that's a nice little workaround hack also. Okay. Let's give people a little bit of advice on what to do if their credit is stolen. The first thing that you keep saying that I feel like I should just repeat is, if you just put a freeze on your credit, it won't get stolen, right? People cannot put anything. They cannot use your credit for anything if you have a freeze on it. So focus on that piece before you worry so much about what to do if you were to have an issue.
But if you don't have a freeze, or if somebody just stole your credit card number and had an expense, you should move very quickly, because what a lot of these criminals do is that they will try credit card numbers and put small test things to see if it's caught, or they'll open a small account to see if somebody has credit monitoring or if it's possible. And then as soon as they find out that there are no repercussions and they can still do it, they will continue to do it more and with larger numbers. So if you see something, you need to move immediately. So pick up the phone and call your
see something,
credit card.
say something.
Yes. To your credit card company and have them send you a new card.
Nice. And then also to that point, even if it's not just a charge on your credit card, if you get a note that says a change of address like I did, like act quickly on that stuff, because I was a day away from them mailing a credit card to somebody that was not me. But as soon as you see something that looks a little bit funny, like you need to immediately call the company, even if it's not a company that you do business with. Like Google the number. Don't even call the number from the email because it could be a phishing email. Actually Google the number of like, what is American Express's number? What is Wells Fargo customer service number? And call them and say, hey, I got a really suspicious email. I want to see if it's legit. And they have, very tried and true ways of handling calls like that. And we'll help you out immediately.
And Maggie, that reminds me, one of the things that always makes me nervous is when I get a call that says, we believe your credit card has been stolen. Can you please verify your identity? And in most cases, it is the credit card or the bank calling me, but I am so distrustful of anything that I will say, let me just call you back on your main number. Thank you. And then I hang up and I'll go look at the back of my credit card and call that number, because there are some very sophisticated phishing schemes out there. And so just don't look at the phone number on the email. Don't respond if somebody calls you. Like, go find the number yourself and call them.
Yeah. Yeah. I sometimes like to mess with the phishing schemes and really string them along for a while. And ask them hard questions back and stuff. And it's just when I have a little too much time on my hands. Okay. The other thing to point out, which I know I don't need to convince you of why you don't need monitoring services, but if you do have a monitoring service, you need to call them right away. They will handle some of it for you, but there's actually a lot of things that they're just going to tell you actually have to then go do yourself, which is yet another reason, Mike, I know you think these services are worthless, but it is worth keeping in mind if you do have an issue, even though those services market themselves sometimes as having a white glove service, there are things that they just cannot do on your behalf, and they basically will just tell you all the things you need to do and help you through it. But many of them you still have to take a good bit of your own time to go and deal with. So it's like a lot of the topics we talk about, Mike. even though it's a little bit more work to go do something on your own, it actually teaches you a lot about it. And so certainly I can see a school of thought that says, you don't need any sort of credit monitoring or ID theft monitoring. You just need to put a freeze on your credit and be very proactive and vigilant about, keeping an eye on charges on your card, and other things. So I'm almost there.
All right.
Maybe by our next episode, I will have canceled my service. And
I'm going to keep giving you shit about it every time we review your expenses.
it pains me to think about the last 10 years of paying $400 a year. Okay, why don't we wrap up, Mike, and just share our top 3 takeaways from this episode?
How about you give your 3 takeaways, and I might give my 3 takeaways.
I think
and
you
we'll
have
see what
one
their
takeaway.
Overlap is. So
Okay,
why don't
I'll
you give all
my
3?
3?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give my 3, and then you basically can just use the word credit freeze at the end. So, number 1, credit monitoring and identity theft monitoring services provide certain types of protection. So understand that and kind of know what the options are and know what you're even thinking about getting. Number 2, you can get most of the protection simply by freezing your credit. Mike, you should like that, right?
I agree
That's
with that
one
one.
of the only good takeaways there in your eyes. And then number 3, which I think in a roundabout way you would say you agree with, make a decision that is right for you, right? So as always, spend money on the things that you are passionate about and care about. And if this is something that just gives you a certain level of peace of mind, like I'll be honest, I've said this before, my identity was stolen twice. And this has always sort of just been something that gives me some peace of mind. And so I've been okay with it. You're starting to like kind of wear me down though, Mike, and challenge my thoughts. But the point is, as with all things that we talk about, make the decision that is right for you. You don't have to do what Mike says. Now, what do you say, Mike?
Freeze your credit reports. Freeze your kids' credit reports. You'll be fine.
Okay, I like it.
I enjoyed this, Maggie. I feel like we got to kind of have a little debate, which is not our usual show schedule.
I was going to say, I think you enjoy it because you enjoy debunking all of these like made up stats and just points that I make.
Right.
Like I see a little spark in your eye every time I make a point, and then you're like, "Ooh, I've got a really great point that like kills that point."
Yeah.
You see a little glimmer in your
when
eye.
you start throwing out stats, but then don't say what your source is, I know
just
that I'm
didn't
going to be
really
able to
wanna
poke
take
some
the
holes in
time.
it.
My source is Google and whatever might be indexed on Google. I didn't feel like writing it down.
Whatever is the
Or
top
the
search
number.
result
I
on
just
Google
remembered
is your
one
source.
bigger. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed that discussion.
If you have any questions or comments, or would like to call in and challenge my perception of credit monitoring, you can give us a call or text us at 404-981-3370. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. You can also follow us on Instagram or Facebook, and we share a lot of different great content, tips, and things to keep you inspired along your own personal finance journey.
And please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. It really helps other people find our show.
Cool. You can also find us at friendsonfire.org. And thanks again to Clap for Daylight for our intro music. You can find them on iTunes. Okay, thanks for a great discussion, Mike.
This was fun. Thanks, Maggie.
Thanks, Mike. Bye.
Bye.